If you're after a new electric car, but you can't decide whether you'd like a family car, an SUV, or maybe even a coupe, this Citroen e-C4 might be the car for you. In this video, we're going to tell you everything that you need to know about it. But first, this video is supported by PodPoint, winner of our Best Home EV Charger Test 2023. Look in our description below to find out more. So, what is the e-C4? Well, in short, it's an electrified version of the very comfortable C4. It was first launched back in 2020 alongside the third generation of C4 and has since had one small update. That brought the option of a slightly larger battery and also a new infotainment system, both of which we first saw on the e-C4X, which is this car's saloon sibling. Today though, we're focusing on this, the regular e-C4. But what's it a rival to? Well, it can be quite hard to pin down exactly what this is up against, because it's an alternative to SUVs like the Kia Niro EV or the MG ZS EV or the Peugeot E2008, but also hatchbacks like the MG4 and the VW ID3. Right, let's start with the e-C4's interior. It's one of the nicest interiors in a Citroen to date. It mixes good build quality with lots of nice materials. It's not quite as nice as the Mazda MX-30s, but it does feel posher than the MG4. Just prodding around, there's lots of nice materials, and while there are some cheaper, harder plastics, they're hidden quite far down so you won't ever notice them. This particular car is in max trim, which means it gets a couple of extra bits, including some softer leather on the steering wheel and also these particularly nice Alcantara seats. Speaking of which, the driving position itself is somewhere between SUVs like the MX-30 and smaller hatchbacks like the ID3. There's plenty of manual adjustment on the driver's seat, including lumbar support no matter which version you go for, and you've got plenty of steering wheel adjustment as well. The passenger seat also gets manual height adjustment no matter which version you go for. In terms of storage, you get these door bins that'll take a bottle of water, got a cubby inside the armrest, a couple of cup holders down here, and this large cubby here. You also get this one, which is designed for a smartphone and doubles up as wireless phone charging on the top trim levels. On the passenger side, above the glove box, you've got this really handy little tray and also this device here, which, providing you've got the right accessory from Citroen, will hold a tablet. As with a lot of coupes, this sleek roof comes at the expense of rear visibility. The view of your shoulder is limited by thick rear pillars, and your view out the back is limited by this small rear window. It isn't helped by the spoiler going straight across the middle. Luckily, you get rear parking sensors as standard, and if you go for Max or E-Series trim, you'll add front parking sensors and a rear view camera, which is displayed on the 10-inch infotainment screen. On that, you get the same size screen in every e-C4. The only thing is, if you go for one of the top two trims, you get one with slightly higher resolution and also a slightly different operating system. Either way, the basic layout is the same. You get these shortcut buttons, this volume knob, and also these handy climate controls down here, which makes it much easier to make changes while you're on the move. The software itself isn't quite as intuitive as the Kia Niro EVs, but luckily you get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard, so you can bypass Citroen's system. Most coupes suffer when it comes to rear space, but the e-C4 isn't a regular coupe, and as you can see, there's plenty of space back here for a couple of adults. It's certainly bigger than the MX-30, but it only suffers when it comes to headroom, which if you were 6 feet tall, you'd feel quite cramped. Legroom is pretty decent though, and there's plenty of space underneath the front seat for your feet. If, however, you do regularly fill the rear seats, the Kia Niro EV and the VW ID3 are even better, so just bear that in mind. The e-C4 has a 380 litre boot. In our tests, we managed to fit 5 carry-on suitcases in, which is more than a Mazda MX-30 and a Smart #1, but less than a Volkswagen ID3. Handy features include a couple of clothes hooks and cubbies on either side, and also a movable boot floor. That means you can chuck your cables underneath, or you can drop it down to have a larger boot space. For long items, you get 60/40 splitting rear seats and a really handy ski hatch, but only if you go for max trim or above. Unlike a lot of other electric cars, you don't get a front boot in the e-C4. Most e-C4s come with a 50 kilowatt-hour battery, which gives you 46.3 kilowatt hours in usable capacity and a range of between 219 and 221 miles, depending on which trim you go for. On a cold day like this though, in our test we found it to be more like 140 miles, which is fine if you're nipping around town, but not great if you want to go further afield. Most rivals will go further, but they will also cost you more than an entry-level e-C4. The exceptions are the MG ZS EV and the MG4, both of which have a similar range but will cost you a lot less. You can also swap to a 54 kWh battery if you go for the top trim, and that increases the range to 260 miles. But it also increases the price and puts the e-C4 in the crosshairs of some much better rivals. In fact, you could even get an MG4 extended range for about the same price, and that has a range of over 300 miles. No matter which battery you go for, the e-C4 will charge from 10 to 80% on a 100 kilowatt charger in less than 30 minutes. If you plug into a 7 kilowatt home wall box, it will take 7.5 hours to charge fully. Inevitably, whichever version you go for, the battery means that it's heavier than the regular C4. And that can be bad news when it comes to ride quality. You see, usually you have to stiffen the suspension in order to compensate for all that extra weight. The e-C4 though is different. This still has quite soft suspension, and as a result, it glides over small imperfections really easily, and it shields you from larger ruts really well. Of course, it does have a downside. Unlike the ID3, which is a bit stiffer, on an undulating road, you're moved around in your seat a lot more and it can feel quite bouncy. And, as you might expect, doesn't handle particularly well either. There's plenty of lean through corners, and the light steering doesn't give you much idea of what the front end is up to. Thing is, if you're buying an e-C4, you're probably not looking to set records at Silverstone. And it's a good job too, because none of them are particularly fast. If you go for the 50 kilowatt hour battery, you get a 134 brake horsepower electric motor, and that gives you a 0 to 62 time of 10 seconds. If you go for the 54 kilowatt hour battery, you get a slightly more powerful 154 brake horsepower motor, and that does drop the 0 to 62 time to 9.2 seconds. And in both cases, it's fine for just driving around normally, but a lot of the e-C4's rivals are quicker. If you've decided to buy an e-C4, which one should you go for? Well, as we've mentioned, there are two batteries to choose from. The smaller one is available with 3 trims, but the bigger one is only available with the most expensive top trim, which is why we reckon that the pick of the range is the smaller battery and the cheapest trim. The range isn't great, but it undercuts a lot of rivals at that price. Jumping to the bigger battery just doesn't seem worth it, because the extra range you get isn't all that significant. And it's not like that entry-level trim is stingy on kit. You still get dual air conditioning, cruise control, heated door mirrors and automatic headlights. In terms of options, you get white paint as standard, so you might want to pay a little extra for one of the metallic paint choices. You can also get an 11 kilowatt onboard charger, but that's only going to be useful if you get regular access to a 3-phase electricity supply. The only other option you might consider is the Safety Pack Plus. It's not cheap, but it upgrades the entry-level car's active safety braking system so it will react to cyclists as well as pedestrians and cars. And it's worth mentioning that e-C4 was only awarded 4 out of 5 stars for safety when it was tested by Euro NCAP in 2021. It scored poorly for protecting pedestrians outside of the car in the event of an accident, and also for front seat occupant protection when compared to rivals like the Cupra Born and the Smart #1, which both scored 5 stars. So, is the Citroen e-C4 a good choice in the world of electric cars? Well, providing you stick to the entry-level trim, you get a car with a nice interior, comfortable ride, and which is also good value next to its rivals. Once the price increases though, and you step up the trim levels, you might be better spending your money elsewhere. Thank you for watching this review. If you'd like to see another one, click there. Or if you'd like to save more than £2,600 on a Citroen e-C4, head to whatcar.com by clicking here.